Falconheart's hoofs thundered on the hard ground, dark green fir trees flew by, and the wind rustled into Cheyenne's ears. She just couldn't take it anymore. What's been going on lately? Bad luck seems to haunt me as if it was my own shadow. Not only did the pony die, it's dead just because of me. And I put everyone else in danger, not only Falconheart and Adokas, but also, for the second time now, Glaczio. Why did I ride away? I left him standing, just like that, in the middle of the wilderness. He doesn't have a horse anymore and has to get on by foot somehow. Oh no, what if the knights found out that he helped me and they're now pursuing him too? No, I'm putting everyone in danger. The girl reproached herself enormously and was so overwhelmed by the whole situation that she didn't know what to do. What would she do now? How would she find Saralay? Would Glaczio fare well? And if they met again one day, would she even be able to look him in the eye? After a while, the ground sloped down. The three companions came to a stream and Cheyenne stopped Falconheart so he could have a drink. Adokas also took a few sips. She wiped her tears from her face with her hand and looked around. This place was beautiful. In the place where the stream flowed, there was a forest clearing. Behind it stretched the coniferous forest through which she had come. You could even see a part of the Glaczio mountains above the tall fir trees. The sky was full of chroma stars and the source of life could already be seen. On the other side of the stream there was a mixed forest. Deciduous and coniferous trees grew there in the most beautiful shades of green. Far and wide, however, there was no path to be seen. The girl was completely disoriented and would just ride straight ahead, following the course of the river. The rippling water of the stream probably came from the Glaczio mountains, and may even have originated from the spring water that plunged into the depths at last night's sleeping place. The river made a curve a few meters next to Falconheart, and then went straight into the mixed forest. When the horse and the fairy wolf had apparently drunk enough, the journey continued. Cheyenne had stopped crying and calmed down somehow, even though she was still reproaching herself and feeling bad. She let Falconheart wade through the river to get to the other side. For better or worse, Adokas had to swim across. But it wasn't a problem for him at all. The fairy wolf jumped joyfully into the cold water and kicked through the stream. Once on the other side, he shook himself vigorously, so that many drops of water were thrown through the air. Immediately afterwards, the girl on her horse had also made it to the other shore. She rode Falconheart in a walk along the river into the mixed forest. In the midst of the many trees it was dark and quiet. Not even birds were chirping. The only thing you could hear was the babbling of the river. Cheyenne looked at the scratches on her arms. They had already stopped bleeding and some were barely visible. The wounds on her two companions, on the other hand, were still open. She had often become suspicious about this. When the girl still lived in the Undercity and she had helped her grandparents in the field, there were often a few cuts. But Cheyenne's injuries healed much faster than those of her grandparents. The couple had always blamed it on the age difference. They said that a young girl would have better and faster healing process than two older people. They were actually right, but her wounds always healed much faster than Xava's too. When she had tinkered with him, for example, on the weapon belts, both had suffered some cuts on their hands. The next day, however, Cheyenne's wounds had been barely visible, unlike Xava's. The girl found this quick healing ability extremely convenient, but at the same time she also found it a bit strange and extraordinary. She shook off her thoughts and looked forward again. Through the ears of her beloved horse, she could only see that the river seemed to go straight on forever. The only thing that changed was that the course of the stream became wider and wider. In the forest it was beautiful, but also much too quiet. Not a single animal was heard or seen. It was so quiet that it almost seemed creepy. The strange mood seemed to make Falconheart nervous, for he snorted, raised and lowered his head restlessly, and trembled from time to time. And Adokas also looked wildly around. Cheyenne stroked her horse's neck to calm him down and whispered to him that everything was fine. "Falconheart, calm. Everything is fine. I also think it's way too quiet here, but that's no reason to be so nervous right away, is it? I really hate to say it, but if Glaczio were here now, I'd feel more comfortable." "Oh, what am I saying? It was my own decision to leave, and it was a good one. Now at least I don't put his life in danger anymore, and don't have to be called stupid nicknames anymore, right, Adokas?" The girl tried to speak in a reasonably calm voice and appeared cheerful to calm her two four-legged friends down, but she did not succeed. She could not radiate confidence, but only sadness and despair. Of course, this mood was transferred to the horse and the fairy wolf, and Cheyenne felt even worse than before. Suddenly, Adokas flinched, pulled up his tail, pricked up his ears, raised his antennas and stared stiffly into the forest. His whole neck fur stood up and he growled softly. Then he made himself a little small and laid his ears very flat. Falconheart stood on his hind legs, barely noticeable, rolled his eyes in horror and fright, and also laid his ears back completely flat. But Cheyenne ignored the behavior of her companions and now drove her horse forward at a trot. The fairy wolf followed the two and looked back every few seconds. The girl knew why the two four-legged friends were suddenly so nervous. They had heard something, and Cheyenne had heard the sound as well. At first it sounded as if something or someone had stepped on a branch which was then broken, and then the strange silence was disturbed by heavy breathing. The girl didn't want to be in that forest anymore. She wanted to get out of here as soon as possible. Her heart began to beat wildly. She became nervous and anxious. This breathing did not come from an animal. It had been much too slow for that. It sounded more like a human, but because it was so heavy, it seemed almost inhuman again, almost animal again. Cheyenne did not dare to turn around. She kept her eyes on the river, hoping that they would soon reach the end of the forest. Again, Cheyenne heard a heavy gasp, very close to her. Then, one somewhere in the trees above her, then in front of her and behind her. The sound of heavy breathing came from everywhere. Whatever it triggered either had to be able to run from here to there quite quickly and unnoticed, or it would come not just from one being, but from several. The wheezing became louder and louder, came closer and closer, and seemed more and more threatening. "What the hell is going on here? What is that?" Cheyenne felt that she was shaking all over and tried to breathe quietly and calmly. Even though this was the scariest moment of her entire life, she had to try not to lose her composure. But she didn't succeed for long, because suddenly it became quiet. All sound except for the clatter of the hoofs and the splashing of the water fell silent. Nervously, the girl looked around in all directions. She looked behind her, and her gaze lingered there. In the far distance, Cheyenne saw the silhouette of a hairy human-like creature with 3 tails and bright white eyes staring at her. For a brief moment her heart stopped and she forgot to breathe. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, right behind Falconheart, in front of Cheyenne's eyes, a similar creature rushed down and gave the horse huge deep scratch marks with its claw. The brown stallion rose and neighed hysterically in pain. The girl cried out in shock and struggled to hold on. She turned forward again and challenged her horse to race in a shrill, loud voice. "Run, Falconheart, run!" When the front legs of the mount came back to the ground, it shot forward like lightning and galloped for its life. The stallion was uncontrollable and simply rushed forward. Arukas did his best to keep up with the horse's pace, and Cheyenne, scared to death, leaned on the stallion's neck. Immediately afterwards, she straightened up again and found that these beings were following her. They moved enormously fast and jumping, were above the trees next to the three companions and behind them. It was now possible to see more precisely what they looked like. The pursuers had about the stature of a human, different colored fur on the back and lower body, had three tails that looked like purple snakes, had the teeth of a wolf, bright white eyes, and instead of hands, sharp, powerful metal claws. Suddenly, one of them jumped up to Cheyenne, but she was able to duck at the last moment and dodge her hunter's grips. The pursuers began to pant like dogs and whispered almost intelligibly, "Kill the girl!" Cheyenne closed her eyes. She was terribly scared. She couldn't even think anymore. Then the heavy breathing of the pursuers was masked by another sound. It was the river. It was getting louder and louder, the splashing more and more wild. The girl forced herself to open her eyes again and looked ahead. The wide stream disappeared between bushes and trees. Behind it rose dense, light blue mist. Then Cheyenne realized the situation she was in. Fog? What? No, a waterfall! It was already too late to stop, and even if the horse had stopped, her pursuers would have killed her. The girl desperately tried to turn Falconheart to the right with all her strength, but he stopped responding. The stallion jumped over the bushes with her, followed by Arukas, and all three fell down into the depths. During the fall, Cheyenne fell unconscious. The last thing she heard was the frightening whining of her faithful fairy wolf and the shrill neighing of her beloved horse.